I'm most proud of the people that I was instrumental in hiring, the people that I selected, the kind of people from which have come 11 CEOs and 8 COOs of major corporations outside of what is now Rockwell.
Autonetics' background can best be described as a history of achievement. That history was made possible by a group of very talented individuals. In addition to the pioneers who you have just seen, we can't forget the contributions of leaders we weren't able to interview, such as Norm Parker, Fred Eystone, George Lease, Don Williams, Joe Geisler, Bob Caseby, Ernie Manuel, and Ernie Youngren. Hello, I'm Don Southwell, a longtime employee of Rockwell International's Defense Electronics Organization. I see you've already met some of my former bosses and colleagues and are probably wondering why they're feeling so proud. It was their vision, their ingenuity, and that of their predecessors that led to the accomplishments of the men and women at North American Aviation and its descendant organizations, such as the Autonetics Division. In order to fully appreciate the depth of their emotion, let me set the stage by stepping back in time to that period when our nation was threatened with the fear and destruction of war, to the mindset of the people, some of them your friends and relatives, who lived through the terror of an actual war. To many of us, World War II was an event we read about in history books. Among other things, it was war during which German technology and guided missiles became legendary. Two vengeance weapons, the V-1 and V-2 rockets, were the most dreaded. The V-1 was a subsonic pulse jet, essentially a pilotless jet airplane, and the V-2 was a supersonic, intermediate-range ballistic missile. World War II was also the event from which North American Aviation, or NAA, emerged with a new place in American history. In addition to producing a total of 42,683 aircraft, more than any other American plane maker, the company produced the most successful trainer, fighter, and medium bomber in American history. Under the visionary leadership of two North American aviation pioneers, James H. Dutch Kindleberger and Leland Lee Atwood, a small group of scientists and engineers specializing in electromechanics was formed into the Aerophysics Laboratory. In those early days, inertial navigation was a new science and art. Up to that time, pilots navigated through the use of dead reckoning, the method of advancing from a known position to a later position by adding one or more vectors that represent known courses and distances. It had become clear that none of the existing techniques was satisfactory for the military navigation problem. The Aerophysics Laboratory was moving rapidly toward making inertial navigation a standard technique.
As our advanced research projects extend our scientific frontiers,
in 1948, John Moore was right in the middle of these historic changes as one of America's leading authorities in the emerging field of automatic navigation and inertial guidance.
For the company and employee alike.
The genesis of the inertial navigation activity at then North American Aviation, now Rockwell, was sometime right after the end of World War II. Key in those days was John Slater. He was what I would call the spiritual leader of the spiritual inspiration of the inertial navigation activity at North American. Another very important leader was Fred Eystone. Fred was totally different from John Slater in that he was much more of a manager and less of a visionary. But they both were there when I got into North American on the 2nd of February, 1948. The Navajo program was the major program for which inertial navigation was going to be an essential part. And the Navajo, as originally conceived, was a rocket-boosted ramjet, more than Mach 3 cruise missile, cruising at somewhere between 70 and 80,000 feet. The idea being that it could get to targets in the Soviet Union in about 3 hours. In the meantime, our inventors, and I don't remember who it was, but I'm sure that John Slater had a lot to do with it, came up with a concept of 6 gyroscopes, 3 of which would be reversing while the other 3 continued to stabilize the inertial platform. This was called the Navan principle, and we did it that way because it was spelt the same way forwards and backwards. And Navan had to be an acronym, so it was called Navan, North American Vehicle Auto Navigator. But we really did it that way because of the fact that we had a reversing gyro system, and we wanted something spelled the same way forwards and backwards. Now, you may be interested in how the Autonetics division got its name. We wanted to have a name which began with A, so it would be at the top of lists. And so we said, well, probably everything we're going to do is going to have auto in it, begins with A, and somebody in the advertising area that North American used had learned about cybernetics, and they thought that netics would be good, and we said, well, everything we have probably ends in X. And so we came up with Autonetics, and the only mistake that we made in picking Autonetics was its length, because it was too long to have large letters, and in a subsequent chance I had to pick it by, instead of having 10 letters, I ended up having 6, so that the letters could be larger. But that's how Autonetics got its name.
In 1958, Autonetics played a crucial role in making history. The historic cruise of the world's first atomic-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus, under the treacherous ice cap of the Arctic Ocean to the North Pole was made possible by the Autonetics N6A1, a modified version of the Navajo inertial navigator.
The interesting thing about the Navan system was that when we packaged it for the Navajo, we also anticipated the fact that it would be useful in submarines. And that was back in well, I've forgotten what time exactly, but 1952 or 1953. So we purposely made the size of that platform 1/4 of an inch smaller than a submarine hatch. That later became an important reason why the Navajo inertial navigator was the navigator which, along with the engineer from what was then actually Autonetics, Tom Curtis, caused the Nautilus and the Skate submarines to be able to navigate under the ice over the North Pole. It was done with the anticipation, back in the early 50s, that we would be able to use that scheme for a submarine autonavigator. Now, of course, we use submarine autonavigators that are totally different because we can make so much better instruments. But in those days, it was interesting, I thought, that we had that much foresight.
In 1959, Autonetics began delivering inertial navigation systems for Polaris missile-carrying submarines, the N7A Ship's Inertial Navigation System, or SINS. Today, virtually all the U.S. Navy submarines are guided by Autonetics-built navigators. All of these achievements established Autonetics as a major producer of inertial navigators for missiles and nuclear-powered submarines. We had entered the big leagues. And soon thereafter, Autonetics would assume a critical role in the ICBM guidance and control technology.
This is the Arctic Ocean. Somewhere under this sea of ice is an American submarine, the nuclear-powered Nautilus. Compasses play tricks up here in the high latitudes. A magnetic compass spins erratically. a gyro compass can drift. Where in this nowhere is Nautilus? These men know where they are, exactly. Time 23:15, 3 August 1958. Place 400 feet below the North Pole. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, 22 June 1958. USS Nautilus is arriving from, well, the word being passed is that the cruise was south near the equator. This is not quite true, but to observe the security of the actual mission, the equator story has been rehearsed by all hands. Nautilus really is arriving from the north, the far north. Nautilus left Seattle 19 days ago. Announced destination, the equator. Actual destination, the Arctic. Code name, Operation Sunshine. Not warm sunshine, but 24-hour sunshine. Probing the depths of the Chukchi Sea beyond the Arctic Circle, Nautilus was confronted by ice. So thick and deep, there was danger of becoming trapped between the underside of the ice and the shallow sea bottom. The commanding officer decided to retrace his course and wait at Pearl Harbor for better ice conditions. Nautilus waits. Her equipment is checked and tested. Her officers study the problem. It is decided the navigator should fly up and have a look at the top side of the ice. Leaving his twin dolphin insignia behind, he poses as a dewline inspector. A submariner flying with an anti-submarine patrol. Someday, they will know about his true mission. The heavy ice is now moving farther north. The door is opening. Back to Pearl Harbor, on the double. 2000 local time, 22 July 1958. Place, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. USS Nautilus proceed with mission. Operation Sunshine 2. Destination, classified. To avoid detection, Nautilus will run submerged. This is the realm of Nautilus, her element. Her top speed, classified, but more than 20 knots. Her operating depth, 400 feet. Powered by atomic energy, Nautilus is capable of cruising 20,000 leagues under the sea on one charge of fuel. The submerged course, north, straight up through the Aleutians. Bring St. Lawrence off the starboard and Siberia to the port. Proceed, north. Up scope. Take 30 seconds. Check position. Proceed. Now through the Bering Strait, across the Arctic Circle, and into the Chukchi Sea. Never forget, Nautilus is a fighting ship. Training in all operations keeps her trim. She's also a home. Best food in the Navy. From here to the North Pole is a nearly solid cover of ice, the polar pack. 1,800 miles from here to the closest edge in the Greenland Sea. Chief Rail aids Lieutenant Jenks in plotting the course. From here on, some known facts, some unknowns. The ice, not too thick. The sea bottom, some of it charted, some not. From here on, skill counts, and courage, and faith. Faith in the officers. Faith in the other members of the crew. In Nautilus and her gear. The nuclear power plant. Faith in the navigation systems. The old and tried, the new and true. And faith in the Almighty. Ahead, history. Take her down. Nautilus has been under the ice for more than 60 hours. Civilian scientists Archie Walker and Waldo Lyon operate the topside fathometer. How thick is the ice overhead? Check. Sonar. How far to the ocean bottom? Check. What's ahead? Check. The drinking water, is it pure? Check. And the air? Is it within safe limits? Tested. Navigating 1,200 miles under the polar ice, Nautilus has a seventh sense at work, inertial navigation. Civilian guidance engineer Tom Curtis translates the readings. With no outside references, the inertial navigator reads, remembers, and interprets accelerations in all directions, giving exact position readings constantly.
This is the captain. In a few moments, Nautilus will realize a goal long a dream of mankind, the attainment by ship of the North Geographic Pole. Stand by. 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark for the USA and the U.S. Navy, Sunday, 3 August, 1958, 23:15 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the North Pole.
The captain, Commander William R. Anderson, drops in on the crew's celebration. A letter to the Commander-in-Chief. One of the crew ships over for another 6-year hitch. Naturally, the principal resident of the North Pole pays a visit to Nautilus. Congratulations to the men who passed all exams and are now qualified in nuclear submarines. The North Pole, where brave explorers searched and discovered, suffered, and died. Names flood the memory. Ross, Peary, Stephenson, Amundsen, Wilkins, Byrd. To these names add Commander William Anderson and the crew of Nautilus. 116 Americans crossing the North Pole with no frostbite, no hunger, no illness, but with skill, courage, and the Navy spirit. And now, south. The serious business of running out to open water is still at hand.